the science of high school, essentially, and keeping records of stuff, doing the standardized testing. And if you have younger kids, a lot of times a portfolio. Texas doesn't require that, but another number of other places do require you to bring a portfolio. I know Florida does, and a few other states do. Portfolios, somebody was telling me earlier about how they did it. Oh, and I'm going to put some of these up there. I haven't finished making it yet, but there's a sheet that talks about first day of school, and you interview your child with these questions on the first day of school, and then at the end of the year, you've got what your child started out. And so there's that, and then they just keep a binder with the little pages, the sheet protectors, and they put the art in there. And so they have some by the end of the child's elementary school. They've got 6 binders for the kid. I did that, and when I moved, I threw them all away. And I think actually I threw them away before that, because I knew they knew how to read. I knew they knew how to do math. I knew they knew how to do the basic stuff, and I knew what I had covered. And I didn't have to prove it to anybody in case, somebody comes along and says, oh, you're not doing school. I kept like their first, second grade, third grade stuff for years. And then I just pitched them eventually. I kept the ones that I liked the best, the art stuff, and I put it in a bin that I use for memory stuff. But to do a portfolio, I just straight up used I used a 3-ring notebook. And sometimes, okay, I'm going to give you this tip. Make sure that your children, especially if they're close in age, write their name on their paper, because you can't always tell whose handwriting is whose, and they're doing the same lesson. So trying to figure out who did what about a month after you finish doing the lesson, it could be kind of crazy. And then you show it to your kid, like, is this yours or your sister's? Oh, really? You did it. It's yours. So yeah, that was.
And I also have that problem if they go to a co-op. I cannot tell you, I was the administrator of a co-op for 4 years, and I cannot tell you the number of teachers that would come sit up there during their break with me and go, look, no name, look, no name. And I actually taught an English class, and it was like, okay, guys, y'all got to put your names on your paper. So it's good for practice whenever they go to college too.
Right, yeah. But it wasn't something I thought about when they're, little. You're teaching them how to write their name, but I never thought, like, for the first 6 months, oh, I'm going to need to know which kid did which paper, because I was just kind of piling them off to the side as they did them every day. And then when I went to go try and put them into some kind of order, then it was hard, because you didn't know who did what. And the art, really, you don't know who did what, because art is, especially at that age, it's very abstract. So, sometimes it's the kid that likes the black crayon, but that's not always the case. And so that was something that we had. A portfolio usually consists of a selection of lessons that came from certain, like a different one for history, a different one for English, a different one for spelling and things like that. What I did in the beginning was each of them had a binder, and every day we put the lessons in, and then we got disorganized and that stopped. But in the beginning, every year we started organized. We had a checklist, we had a schedule. My kids never did any of them the way I wanted them to, but I really tried. And then, but the portfolio, if you're going to have one, you might want to, if you're military or you're somebody who moves a lot, you might need to keep something along those lines. Just not even a huge one, but enough that somebody can come along and go, okay, well, you did teach them this. Okay, you did teach them this. Because some of the states are really, really rigid about what you teach your kids and how you teach your kids. Texas, fortunately, is not one of those. But yeah. There are some of them you can't. I know in, I think it's Florida, I'm sure Alabama too, you have to have, or no, Georgia, you have to have an umbrella school, which is an organization like a church or something like that, that acts as a school, and then you go in under their school, as opposed to, I think California's that way too, as opposed to in Texas, you are your own school. And so when you go to award a diploma in Texas, you award the diploma with the name of your school on the top, our said Peterson Odyssey Academy. And you can have that diploma be any way you want to. I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to have to go back and circle around. Elementary school portfolio is a really cool thing to do. Keeps the art, and it keeps everything straight and not torn up by the cats or the dogs. I had no idea that dog ate my homework was a real thing, but apparently it is. And the things that you need to have just to keep your lessons straight are one way to do the portfolio. And another way to do the portfolio is just to keep, a few lessons over the few years, like one from the beginning of the school year and one from the end of the school year. That way you can see the difference between the two. That helps a lot. And then you can start up, the next year. We started different curriculums every year practically, so it was not very standardized, but it can be for some people. Let's see. I think that's it for elementary school. What do you think, Stace? Any other?
Yeah.
For record?
I was very organized because I love office supplies, and so it brought me joy to organize my kids' school and to make sure that everything was in its place where it belonged, and if I needed it, I could always go find it.
Yeah, no.
So
that brought me time for that.
That brought me joy. I don't know why. It's just stupid.
Nobody has time
sometimes
for that.
I find joy in the little things. But
Yeah.
one thing that I did do for my kids, they each had one of these things.
Yeah.
Well, they each had.
We had one of those too. Yeah.
For their different subjects, like
Those
one per subject. And I did different colors because they have like a black one and they have a gray one. So each kid had their own color because I'm a nerd. And so whenever they were finished with work, they would put it in with that subject. And then they would go pick out this next little binder, put it on, time for their next class. So that's what I did.
We're organized.
Huh?
You were organized.
Yeah, I know.
I had one of those for their whole school.
Oh no, one per subject.
There so that we don't lose it.
But with Becca, they had quiz books and test books and a textbook as well.
Books, yeah.
And their notebook that they did their work in. So
yeah, that's something I loved. I loved going to the sales at the beginning of the school years and buying a lot of pencils and notebooks and stuff.
Yeah, school supplies are fun.
Yeah.
A new bouquet of sharpened pencils. Oh,
yeah, exactly.
Heaven. But now I don't do that anymore.
So yeah. So supplies, let's talk about that real quick. We'll talk about what you kind of need. You won't need as much as you think you're going to need ever. Pretty much I would buy, they would have those little spiral notebooks, 10 cents a piece. So you get 10 of them for $1. So I'd usually buy 20 of them. I still have stacks of them laying around here because we would use them, and you have maybe five or six different subjects, and I'd use a different one for each subject. But so some of them, most of the ones that I've got are yellow because my kids didn't like the yellow ones. I don't know. So that was something that we didn't need nearly as many of those notebooks as we thought we were going to need. Pencils. A pencil sharpener is helpful if you're going to use pencils. I got one of the electric ones and it just died about 3 weeks ago. So now we're using the little handheld ones. But so pencils and pens when they get older. Don't give them pens when they're little because it doesn't come off the walls easily. And always get the washable markers because yeah. And then the paint, you can get tempera paint, but sometimes tempera paint stains a little bit. So you gotta be careful with that. And Play-Doh is hard to get out of rugs. Just saying.
Yeah, one thing, for a while they went and said, as a home, well, I don't know if this was for teachers everywhere, But they said, do not mark your kids' paper wrong in red ink because, red means bad, it means stop, it means, all this stuff. So they would say to, do different colors
Yeah, they
whenever
switched to
you got
purple
something
at some
wrong.
point.
Huh?
They switched to purple at some point, and then
Yeah,
purple means all of that now.
yeah. So anyway, so I always bought colored pencils, yeah, and markers. Y'all would laugh. I mean, I'm in my craft room. I could totally, I am such a nerd. I've got this stupid thing that I've had full of markers because why? It's fun and I like to spend money.
Right.
So
Yeah, mine was
I've got a whole dresser full of art supplies and markers and paint and
mine's a box.
you have a box, that's it, that you're gonna need and you don't need.
Yeah, you don't need a lot of this stuff. Yeah.
So you don't have to go out and go nuts and spend a lot of money on supplies.
Now it is kind of cool to, if your kids need clothes, go at that time of the year just because they're less expensive. But you don't need a whole wardrobe of new clothes, and it doesn't matter if they're wearing the fancy. Well, I always want to say Jordache, but it's not Jordache anymore. It tells me how old you are, how old I am. The Miss jeans or whatever they are now.
Those are out too.
Oh, they're out now too. Okay, well, whatever it is, the designer jeans of the du jour. You don't have to have those for the homeschool kids because they don't really, as far as I know, they don't really judge each other on it.
The girls do.
Yeah, the boys do. Oh, the girls do. Yeah, my daughter never cared about it, so.
My daughter did.
Yeah, but so we ended up. My daughter would rather talk about books than clothes, so there's that.
I don't really talk about horses. But.
Yeah, horses. They all liked horses and dogs. So, but yeah, we would get them new clothes in the fall, and in the spring you get them in, well, down in South Texas you get them lots of summer clothes, and they wear the summer clothes until November. But usually by the time you're buying the new clothes, the old clothes they're either worn out or they're just straight up too small, high water jeans, the whole 9 yards. And so those are nice to get during back to school sales. I wonder if they're even going to have back to school sales this year. You think they will?
I don't know. They're usually advertising them by now, and I really haven't. Well, I don't watch TV.
That's true. I haven't seen any. I haven't seen any of the.
I watch Netflix.
I haven't seen the kids putting the most wonderful time of the year song with the kid in the cart while they're going around shopping and stuff. I haven't seen any of those yet. But yeah, they should be starting pretty soon. But anyway, as far as buying supplies goes, keep it minimum, especially if you're on a budget. You don't need to buy a whole bunch of extra stuff.
Otherwise, you'll have a whole dresser full.
Yeah, and
you've got homecoming mom materials in there. I mean, I can't even tell you.
Yeah, loose leaf paper. Never used it. Never did. I've got reams of it because we just never used it, and we stuck with the spiral notebooks because then it didn't get lost. But now copy paper is another story entirely. You can never have too much copy paper because they can draw on that. You can put it in your printer and get all your worksheets printed out and all kinds of stuff. So unlined paper is good. Lined paper, unless you're going to need it, don't buy it because it just takes up space and it gets wrinkled. Let's see what else. Pencils, pens, markers,
a laptop,
glue, a laptop. Yeah, my kids didn't. Well, they did get a laptop about the time they were 12. So they always had access to a computer, but it wasn't. I never did their lessons on the computer because I was trying to cut down the screen time, and because otherwise my son would spend all day and all night on the computer, kind of like he does now. And the other stuff, I guess, yeah, computer's a big one nowadays, and that would be the biggest purchase. But you should be able to at least get 2 or 3 years out of a laptop, hopefully. My kids have gotten 6, so. But the other things like just other supplies. It's nice to have art supplies and things like that, but you don't really need them for homeschooling. It's nice to have the fancy bookcase things like Stacy has there. Mine were cardboard because we had them from something else, and I dumped all that stuff out and I put the kids' stuff in there. So and books are my weakness. It's the weakness of almost all homeschoolers is buying books, and we buy those mostly over at half price books if we can, or used bookstores. You can get them online now used, and now most of my books I buy are the e-reader, but that doesn't work really well for all kids, and especially for younger ones. You really want the tactile sensation of turning a page. There's something about it that they learn better than they do reading something on the computer. As when I was reading up on it, and one of the writers said that it actually stimulates a different part of your brain reading on the computer than it does when you're reading a book. And I thought that was really fascinating because I mean, you're reading. How different can it be? But it's different because, and especially with video stuff too, because the video is very passive, whereas with reading it's much more active. And so that was something I thought that was really fascinating. So with littles, you definitely want to have books if you can get them. So, all right, so that's done with the elementary school. High school, honestly, with elementary school, you don't need to take tests. You don't need to do school records or anything like that. Grades don't start to count for anybody but you until college. If you want to keep grades of your own kids, that's cool, but you don't need them to be able to give to somebody else until college in Texas. Until high school. Sorry, high school. It only matters to you giving them to the college for your high school student. So you want to start probably keeping records around 9th or 10th grade, and just write down, every time write down, hey, we did English. These are the books we read, and then the things that you put in your transcript, you would not put the books you read on the transcript. You would just put the subject name of the class, because as I was saying earlier, it needs to be one page for a transcript.
And email that to yourself.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Because computers do crash,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to email it to yourself so that you can always access it again. Because back whenever my oldest was in school, I didn't think about that, and I lost everything. And right before he graduated, I was like, where is it? Oh my gosh, that was on the old computer and I don't have it. It's gone. It's fried. So
it's so hard to go back and forensically figure all that stuff out.
Yeah, it's
At
not.
least you had it on Abeka, most of it, but
yeah,
that's hard. And especially if you're doing like I did with a very unconventional homeschool program, you're doing a mishmash of different things. It's really hard. And just like life with kids or whatever, the years run together. Unless you're doing something that is, okay, did you take this that year or did you do it the year before? And the kids don't really remember either. So you kind of got to go back and look through your piles of stuff to see what they did when, or you got to look at your planner. And it's hard to forensically figure it out. So the best thing to do is when you start a curriculum or something like that, or when you finish a curriculum, sit down, write down, okay, we covered this, this, and this in this class, and put the dates on it so that you can go and figure out later on. And then, like we said before, if you know what college you're going to try for, or obviously if you're planning to go to college, if you're not planning to go to college, it's not as necessary, but it's a good idea in case you ever decide to go to college, to have the transcript. But you want to make sure that you have data to be able to give to the college for that stuff. But the colleges, they want a one-page transcript. They don't want to know a whole lot of details. If they want to know details, they will ask you for the details. So.
And on that note, which we're really not covering a lot of high school stuff this time, but the other thing is that the colleges really don't care about what's on your transcript. They just want to see that they have taken those classes. They're going to look at their test scores.
Yeah, test scores are the biggest thing for homeschool students
Homeschools.
because you don't have class rank.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing they look at for a high school. They look at class rank and they look at your test scores. And since homeschoolers don't have class rank because everybody's number one in their class, unless you're twins, and then you might have a number one and a number two. But the tests are the big thing for high schoolers. And that's one of the things we're covering in this block. So let's talk about standardized tests a little bit. The big ones are the ACT, the SAT to get into college. There's an ASVAB, which is one that you take if you're interested in going into the military. And then there is the PSAT, which you take as a junior in high school. And if you do really well on it, you can get what's called a merit. No, I guess you take it sophomore year. Yeah. They give you your junior year. They tell you how you did on it. But the merit scholarship is tied to the PSAT. As homeschoolers, it's a little harder because when you're in public school, they tell everybody and they announce, okay, the SAT is going to be held on this date here. And you go and they say, you turn in your money for the SAT yet? Did you turn in your money for the SAT yet? And you're nagged a little bit about it. Homeschoolers, guess what, Mom? It's your job to set that up. We were very lucky, Stacy and I, because one of our friends went and did that because her daughter was the same age as ours. And so we had people that every year would take that on for the group, which was kind of nice. And they would, my daughter took the PSAT in, I think we took it in 9th grade instead of 10th because I kind of wanted to see where they're at, and I kind of wanted them to know how to take standardized tests because it's not something that we teach in homeschool usually. And so I didn't want her to be, when it came time to be taking these tests, I didn't want her to have trouble taking them. We filled out a bubble sheet and figured all that stuff out and did all that when they were younger, but it's not like with the schools where they teach every year you have to take a standardized test, and so the kids get really used to doing it. So
now as a homeschooler, if you have a bachelor's degree or an RN, or I think there's one other one, you can order standardized tests for your kids. Bob Jones curriculum has one, so it's BJU Press. Becca has one, and you can order the Iowa Achievement Test.
We used to take that when I was a kid.
Yeah, and the Stanford Achievement Test,
yeah,
as well. So you can order them on your own. You might not be able to administer them. There are certain criteria you have to meet to be able to administer them, but that's whenever you get your friends together and say, hey, can we do this? And since you have this, meet this criteria, can you be the proctor for this test?
Right. Yeah, we had a friend.
So that is,
yeah, if you can find somebody to do that, that's phenomenal. We ended up with the PSAT, we ended up taking it at one of the high schools, and my daughter was really freaked out by the high school.
Mine too.
Yeah.
It looked like a prison.
Yeah, it did. It really did. So they went to one of the local high schools and took the PSAT. And the idea is if you start in 9th grade, they get used to taking those tests. So the PSAT you usually take as a sophomore, the SAT you usually take as a junior. And there's all kinds of study courses that you can do. You can find some online. Sometimes, like in our area, we had one of the moms would hold a study course every year for the SAT study. The other one in Texas, you have the TSI, which is the entrance exam to get into a junior college or a community college, a 2-year program. The TSI, I don't know, do you have to have it for 4-year college too?
TSI? It depends on what you what your rank is for your SAT or your ACT.
Okay. So I know they use the TSI to place you into certain classes and find out.
If your math score or your reading score is high enough on the SAT, then you do not have to take the TSI. But if it's not, then you have to take the TSI. And you can get into college with just the TSI as well.
Yeah.
At public university, not at private.
Yeah. And that was, my kids were going to Del Mar with the TSI, and that was part of with the dual credit, they had to take the TSI. And my son was in 10th grade. So you wouldn't think that they would do really well, but he was college level in writing by that time. And he was almost college level in reading. So, math we're not going to talk about. But other than that, the TSI, there's all kinds of study programs that you can set your kid on the computer, and they will teach you how to take the TSI. There's also there's resources in town usually that you can hire a tutor to help with the scores as well. And then so those are the standardized tests that you can take, and usually you have to arrange for it, and they do cost money to take. And I think the TSI last I looked, it was like $35, and that you take 3 parts for $35. If you don't pass the 3 parts, then when you go back to take it again, it's still $35 for taking the parts that you didn't pass. So they've got it kind of streamlined right there. And then what was the third thing we were going to talk about? Record keeping. Oh, we talked about transcripts, and they were if you weren't there at the lunchtime call, the ladies were saying that you can do a resume up, and something I told the people the other day that were on the Homeschool High School Facebook Live. My husband is friends with the president of the TAMAC, Corpus Christi, Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and she said that when she looks at resumes and she looks at the accomplishments of students, that if she sees somebody who is in competitive swimming or they're an Eagle Scout, those 2 things, she wants to interview those people. So if your kid's looking at a sport, competitive swimming looks pretty good for that one. So that's one of those criteria that it's kind of a hidden thing, but apparently the people that are taking that do the Eagle Award and that do the competitive swimming have a work ethic that is, I guess, higher than average or something like that. So, and on that note, what was it I was going to say? The Eagle Award, the Gold Award, those sorts of things. If you join the military, you actually get a bump in rank and pay grade, right, Reagan? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you start, instead of starting at an E1, you start at an E2 or an E3. So that's something to consider if your kid is military bound. ROTC, I believe, works that way too. But if they're not in ROTC and they are in Scouts, you can utilize that to do the same thing as ROTC, which I think is kind of cool. So, and if you're going to put your kids back in public school, the standardized testing really, really is, I would say, crucial, because they will take those standardized tests and they will take the work that your child has done. They'll be able to use those standardized tests to kind of help them place your kid. One other thing, CLEP tests. Those are placement tests that universities use. If you take advanced classes like advanced English, or you take advanced math, you can take those. There's tests that you can take and teach your kid how to take those tests, so that when they go to college, they can take those tests and then they can skip some of those requirement classes because they took them in high school. You don't get credit for them, but you don't have to pay for them either. And you can replace them with electives. So that's kind of a nice thing. Or you can finish school early. And so those are, a lot of homeschoolers like to finish school really early. So